I've seen a bunch of really cool games. We got a club bouncer simulator over there. Pretty awesome. Did you wind up, somebody in the back, did you wind up prototyping the white blood cell game? I want to see that. All right. Wrap up your conversation. It is time for us to finish our workshop. Okay, so if you remember, like 6 hours ago or whenever that was, I'm in a fugue state now, I can't even remember, we talked about the concept funnel. So when we're trying to pick an idea for our game or for the feature or mechanic that we're working on as a designer, I recommend you use a concept funnel, which basically means you go wide, right, and then you reduce down to just the one. And prototyping is essentially a tool for us to reduce down to the just one. So we've gone through all of these steps. Now we've hit that fourth step, and we're about to do our final step, which is choose. We actually pick the concept that we commit to building out. Something to call out before we choose. This funnel is a reduction of how it actually generally goes. How it actually generally goes is this is all a bit of a mixed process. We prototype, we go, that's okay. All right, I'm going to go back to the board and brainstorm a little bit more. Like, yeah, I'm getting a little bit closer. Let me try a word prototype on that one. Like, it's a little bit closer. And it winds up being a more conglomeration of steps rather than just a straight, like, I come up with 10 ideas, and then I get down to 5, and then I prototype, and now I'm done. Usually, it's much messier than that, as all things in life are. So we are going to do this final step now, the choose step. So in a professional environment, we'd prototype at least a few different concepts before settling on any just one. This is another sort of core takeaway. I find a lot of junior developers will start prototyping and they'll be like, yep, that's the game. And that's fine sometimes. Sometimes we really do nail it on the first concept, or just for whatever reason, that's the right concept, and so we only prototype to get closer to a final version of the game. But what I encourage you all to do is to prototype at least a few concepts and compare them to each other before picking any one game. Because otherwise we're designing in a vacuum. Otherwise we don't actually know if there's a better concept out there. If we test a couple of games, we can compare them to each other and we can pick the outlier. We can pick the one that's like clearly better. Our 2-hour deadline, however, is up. Corporate is knocking at the door. The all-important question that I want to hear from one or two of you, do we proceed with this design, with this game? And remember that killing your babies, your concepts, is a good thing. If we're like, actually, yeah, this concept sucks, we're not going to build this, that's a good thing. We're closer to a final version of the game. So I would like 2 or 3 people, if we have mics, I keep not telling you this until it's already time. I'd like 2 or 3 people to tell me why or why not you would proceed with this game concept that you just tested. There in the back right. We'll do, how about we do these 3, and then we will say goodbye. So we get a mic over there. We could, can you shout? Can you? Yeah. Mom Life?
Yeah, Mom.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so the problem that I noticed in the first prototype itself was that the scope is too big. Even for a prototype, I mean, there's a lot a mom has to do. And that's where I decided, that...
We love you, Mom.
So yeah, it's like, it's just not, even if I have to prototype even for just one task, that task can spiral out of hand very easily, very quickly.
Yeah.
So it would actually require a lot much thinking.
Yeah.
Even before I get to the prototype. So I need more time to think.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually a really good answer. The biggest thing that kills our prototypes the vast majority of the time, like this is a total guess, but maybe 60 to 70% of prototypes is scope. Is us going, yeah, this is going to require way more animation work than we have the budget for. Or we just don't have the talent on the team to achieve what we're really trying to get at with this game. Scope kills so many games, and once again, that's good. There are indie games with ridiculously small scope that make millions of dollars. The lethal companies are out there. They're few and far between, but they're totally out there. So I like that the first thing you went is like, yeah, I can't really adequately prototype this entire game. Cooking Mama is a great example of a game that is based upon a subset of what you just described. Instead of the entirety of being a mom simulator, it's just cooking simulator. So that's great. Awesome.
Thanks.
And then can we get one of these two here in the middle? So, do you proceed with your game? Tell us.
I would not proceed with my game because, as you keep saying, it's for a corporate company and it's not very marketable and it's not very highly profitable. And if I start to proceed with it, and they will just fire me out of the job because it's not that good. So it's not
marketable. Yeah, that's good. Once again, every time you kill one of your ideas, success. We're closer to something better. And I like that you're mentioning marketability because another one of those things that juniors tend to not think about is whether or not this game is marketable. They build something fun, but they don't build something that people will actually go and want that will hook eyeballs, especially for indies. I'm indie more than anything else. I love my indie developers. We love you, indie devs. For my indies, we have so little marketing dollars, and so it really counts that we make something that's highly streamable, that's got a great hook that makes you go like, what did you just say to me? That's the kind of game that tends to succeed in the indie market, so I love that you went, I just don't think it has that. And the last one?
So the idea which I have, I think it will be very successful. I haven't heard a lot. And so basically it is stuck in an elevator RPG. It's a really short game. Like the game could be done in like 20 minutes. Like it can be done in a very, very low budget. So you can spend your budget on any other thing. So basically the core system is like wiring, communication and handling your anxiety.
Nice.
I've already showed the game before. So basically, the player is on the 100th floor and then there's no power and then he gets stuck. So every 5 minutes, the lift keeps falling down slowly and you'll have to do mini events. So it's like complete action the whole time. The player won't get bored and then you'll have to keep communicating. There are do or die situations. And then because it's just an elevator, you wouldn't even need a lot of budget to make an elevator.
Yeah.
So and then you once you got the elevator, it's complete action and like for 20 minutes. So the game can be done in a very short amount of time. I think it'll be really successful.
That's awesome. I actually don't disagree with you right off the bat. I think it's if we're talking about those two limitations that just killed those two other ideas, the first one was scope. And you're totally right. Elevator simulator, not a lot of assets to build for that. I just got to make a decent looking elevator and a couple of mini games. And then marketability. Maybe. I do think Stuck in an Elevator RPG is a hilarious title, and I would probably click on that. So maybe that's marketable. We want to do testing, of course. We're not just going to prototype and say, yup, this is the idea. We're still going to do market testing. We're still going to check if people actually will click on this thing. But I don't think you're that far off. I could see that working.
Yeah, and it was a real life experience for me 2 days back.
Nice. Based upon real life, that's good too. Now there's a story behind it. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. So, it is time for us to wrap up. So all of you could spend a second now to decide whether or not this game is something you would actually pursue. Hopefully, though, you at least had a good time. And once again, the core thesis of this entire thing is that there's more than one way to prototype. You don't need to jump straight into digital. You don't need to waste a bunch of time coding stuff. You can still get an approximate idea of whether or not your game or feature is promising simply from doing it on paper or even via word of mouth. Prototyping costs time and therefore money. We saw that slide way the heck at the beginning, where even an indie game costed over $100,000 for their prototype, right? Grand Theft Auto 5 costed somewhere around $50 million for a prototype, versus Cuphead something like $5 million and Celeste $150,000. So prototypes are not cheap, and therefore doing them quickly saves you time and money. The faster we can iterate, the faster we can design, that also means the faster we can iterate. And once again, the more iteration cycles we can fit in, generally the better our game is going to be. So start by defining your problem space, your objectives and constraints, ideate a solution for that problem, filter out the weak concepts in any way that you can. Oftentimes we do market testing, we do simple surveying, things like that allows us to throw out weak ideas. Remember those 3 questions we asked that allowed us to kill 6 ideas right away without even prototyping? And then once we have a couple ideas that look like pretty promising, then we prototype. Prototype a couple of concepts, not just one. Digital prototypes are wonderful. They teach us so much about whether or not our games are promising, so much about how to iterate, but they are expensive. So use alternatives as much as you can, especially as a sort of pre-filter step, as a way for us to get closer without having to go digital yet. Word and paper prototypes are super valuable, often as that early step, like I said. And in the end, there's simply more than one way to prototype. I think I'm going to skip these. So that's going to be it. I'll answer maybe a few questions. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm so happy to have had you all here. That has been Rapid Prototyping and the Iterative Cycle. Thanks for coming, everybody. Anybody have any questions? Right there?
So, I agree that once you get a lot of ideas, once you ideate it, you have to also prototype some of these ideas. You have to reject some, you have to prototype some of these to get to the idea that you want to work on. But then, if I look back, then it really started when you asked us to make an RPG, right? And I struggled at that first point where you have to define the game that you want to make, that you want to ideate on. So,
oh, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So, like, how do you? I mean, I know probably this is arbitrary. Like, you just choose a genre and you start with it.
Yeah.
But, is there a process to come to that also?
Yes.
You don't have a corporate or someone above you?
Yeah, actually, go talk to Paulo about that one. Yeah, no, there is this is a talk about prototyping. Prototyping is a valuable step in coming up with a compelling, fun design that our players want and will pay for. But there's a whole other talk, a whole other, profession in choosing a direction that is even viable, is even something that people will pay for. Typically, if you're on a team, that actually usually isn't the designer's job. At least on a plus-size team, a team that's a little bit bigger than indie. In indie, kind of everybody contributes, but anything bigger than indie, usually you aren't coming up with ideas. Usually, whoever's in charge goes, here's what we're building, and now make it awesome. And that's really your job as a designer for the most part. If it is your job to come up with a good game concept, yeah, oh boy, that's like a whole subject into and of itself. It comes down to a combination of a number of different things. Basically, it's really looking at the meta of game development. That is like the quintessential core of it. And when I say the meta, I mean like what is selling well, what are the trends that are currently going on. There's a reason that every time a new big indie hit happens, there's like 10 copycats that come out 6 months later. It's because that works, for the most part anyway. So like, the next time you see a lethal company explode, maybe that's your prompt. You go, okay, I'm going to make something in the genre of Lethal Company right now. There's a million other ways to approach it, and it's not really, the subject material of this talk. And it's not really, once again, the world of the designer. That's more of the business or product side of game development. Absolutely. Up here in front. We've got about 8 more minutes, so we'll take like 2 or 3 more.
So my question is that as a game designer to create portfolio, so in that case we need to create prototypes. So that should be like digital prototypes or like gameplay prototypes or paper prototypes. What should we put?
Can you ask that one more time?
In creating the portfolio, like dev portfolio, design portfolio, in that case, like what kind of prototypes should we put? Like entire gameplay prototype with the programming thing, or the paper prototype, or only the 2D layouts?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the question, as far as I understand it, is when I'm building a portfolio, should I be putting paper prototypes on the portfolio as a designer? And the answer is like, in general, what matters the most on your portfolio is released titles with your name on it. I've said this, I say this all the time, and that's because it's true. Yes, show your paper prototypes, but where it will actually matter is as a part of a released game. So I released this game, and here's a picture and my process to paper prototype it to make sure it was awesome. When you put together a portfolio, the main thing that people are going to look at, remember that recruiters and hiring managers are looking at literally 200 to 300 of these a day, The main thing you want to do is immediately show your work and immediately show that the game is awesome, and that's really what matters at the end of the day. And the game has been successful. As many metrics as you can provide are all really good too. And then give them a button that says like learn more or see my process, and then they can click into that and maybe see the paper prototyping there. And what that shows is that you're a thorough designer that really thinks through how this game becomes awesome and successful. That's, I think, where a paper prototype would be most valuable on your portfolio.
So if I'm a fresher, what will be the approach? Like I can't show any released games, like personal projects. In that case, what should I put in the prototype?
Yep. So I'll answer this one, and then I'll make sure we have a chance for anyone else to ask questions. So this will be the last one here. Yeah, so the concept that you can't get released games is totally false. Not at all to put like pressure on you, but to put a little bit of pressure on you. You can absolutely release games. It is the easiest time that it has ever been to put together and release a game. There are so many tools out there, and there are so many people who want to make games. So, number one, you probably got to go find some strangers and be like, hey, you want to make games together? That's a good step. And then once you've chosen a couple of those people, actually, get that game to release. I'm a huge advocate for, number one, game jams. Has everybody here done a game jam? Raise your hand if you've done a game jam. Yes. Oh, game jams are so awesome. If you haven't already done a game jam, go do game jams. If you have already done a game jam, still go do more game jams. I have some of my own mentors are like 20, 30 years into their career, and they still do game jams regularly, It's such an incredible sort of proving ground and a chance for you to practice in a low-stakes, quick way. So regardless of the game jams, give yourself time box for how long you're going to spend on this game, and I encourage you, when you have no portfolio yet, to not spend longer than a couple of months. Get a game done in like 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. You can still make a relatively compelling game as long as you keep it low scope, and then get that thing done and get it launched. Don't push back the deadline. Release it, because probably, I love you all, but your first couple of games are going to be really bad. And so it's better to get them done and launched, learn your lessons, and move on to the next one than to keep polishing a kind of okay game,
Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions? There in the back? We'll have maybe one more after this.
Hi. So I think I already showed you that board game design with the the dice thing.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to understand that what complexities, if I could add, since you said that thing really made sense to me, that the output of the dice should be an input to another complex system.
Yeah.
So I think that really made sense to me, and I would like to know more on that.
Mm-hmm.
This is just one part of the question. Another part of the question is something of a very generic thing, that how do I come up with good designs? Like how do I become a good game designer? Is there a prototype to becoming making good prototypes? Is my question.
I'm going to tell you all the secret. Are you ready?
Yes.
Steal other people's work. I'm not kidding at all. We all stand on the shoulders of past masters. That is how art happens. And game development is art. If anybody had any doubt about that, it's art. So yes, absolutely steal designs and mechanics from other people's work. There's a design fundamental called the 90-10 rule, which means 90% of your game should be somebody else's game, and only 10% of it should be actually innovative. And that might sound, I actually resisted that for so long as a designer, for years. I was like, no, I gotta make it my own. The reality is players don't want that. They almost never want that. Very occasionally we'll see some indie hit that's like a brand new concept that plays completely differently, but the vast majority of games are just another game with some tweaks. So what I encourage you to do early on is to steal other people's work. It is like totally fine. It is literally legally allowed. There's nothing stopping you. So for you, specifically with your game, I would play other board games. Check out some other educational games. Check out some other board games that are successful. And the minute you find something that looks interesting, just copy it into your game. And that's it. Do that. Great. One more question? Anybody else?
So today we learned about how to prototype and iterate faster.
Yeah.
But is there any system to take the prototype to the final product?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So is there any part of that that you specifically find like most confusing or bewildering?
A lot of times there are many choices to do and you have a limited time. So how do you decide upon that what route should I take to get the final product according to my expectations?
Yeah, so that question is more or less like, how do I develop a game? You know, it's an extremely big question. It would be hard for me to answer right here. But for the most part, you should be, every time you prototype, you should be getting closer to a final feature set, a final mechanical set. So this game, you know, maybe in your first prototype, your game has a farming system and a day-night cycle, and it has enemies that can come eat your crops, and it has like, you know, I don't know, maybe classes that you can pick to be better or worse at farming. And then in the prototype, you realize like the classes don't really seem to matter. Nobody seems to care. Maybe the day-night cycle is becoming too complicated. And so you eliminate those systems, and the only ones you have are that you can farm and that, I don't remember what else I said, the enemies come and, you know, get your crops. So every time you prototype, you should be getting closer and closer to a final design, a final spec, which is an exact list of the mechanics and the systems in your game. And for, this is something that I didn't hear for the longest time and helped me so much. A mechanic is a single input and output. A mechanic is I can press the space bar and I jump. A mechanic is I can, you know, click on this and buy something from the shop. A system is a conglomeration or a collection of mechanics. So, you know, I have the farming system, I have the enemy system. Once I've narrowed those down and I've put them in a spec, a GDD, game design document, then I actually start building the game. That once you start building, you will still be iterating. The GDD is almost never followed in its exact layout. It is always, from the very beginning to the very end, an iterative process. It is always, you know what, we thought this was awesome, it's not. We're still limiting it. Or actually, more often than that is, you know what, this is awesome, and we ran out of money, so we're not going to do it. That happens all the time. So, you know, maybe you prototyped a day-night cycle, and it was so cool, but you just don't have time, so we're just not going to do it. So it's really like, it's like shooting an arrow at a target that is constantly getting smaller. You know, it is getting a little bit better defined, a little bit better defined, a little bit better defined.
Oh.
Yeah, cool. All right, that's going to be it. I have to go soon. I'll hang out for like 10 minutes maybe. But thank you everybody for coming to my talk. It was super fun.